Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is Marvel's funniest film and much braver than the original. Sorry, sweetie, but Marvel's funniest film is actually The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Groot, put your seatbelt on! So we're saving the galaxy again? Yep. Awesome!
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is just about what you'd expect, honestly. I feel like I did good by not hyping myself up for it, because it delivered just about what I expected, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but isn't necessarily a good thing either. I say that from a perspective of expecting absolutely nothing from the first film, only to revere the product delivered. And that's something to keep in mind too, that these are products. Marvel Studios can't venture too off the proven path of quirky yet relatable main character gets into comic mischief when an underdeveloped antagonist approach it, because it's like basically a fact by this point that shit works. It's a cookie cutter formula, and I don't deny that. I have no real huge problem with that either, I guess. If that's what the free market decides, I guess I can't really say anything to the contrary. I don't know, I'm not a fucking economist. At least most of these more modern Marvel movies are competent.
I could do this all day.
But Guardians 1 even sort of broke that formula, as much as they were comfortable with at least. The villain was, yeah, pretty forgettable, and the stakes were painfully high as usual. If bad man does bad thing, then everything ever will go to shit. Now where's their fucking 1250? Having a team of characters, each with their own pre-installed abilities, got around most of the whole origin story thing, at least if you don't count Peter Quill's dying mom and subsequent abduction, as the story was mostly about the team learning to work together and trust each other, growing as people, instead of superhero learns his powers, then grows a bit maybe, and does a power better than the bad guy. And in terms of tone, instead of having banter that may feel a little out of place, it owned it and made it a huge part of the movie's identity by making a team of bickering assholes. Guardians of the Galaxy is a seriously enjoyable experience riddled with charming asshole-ish humor delivered by asshole characters, a refreshingly grounded feel to it, and interesting new characters. Even if Starboy is kinda a discount Tony Stark, Chris Pratt pulls off a bit more of a cowboy personality, which is appropriate as Guardians feels very much like a space western. My problems with Volume 2 mostly involve delving deeper into spoiler territory, so before I do, for those of you out here who are just looking for a recommendation or a dissuasion, let me just say that this is in no way a bad movie. It takes our now beloved characters in new directions and allows them to develop accordingly. If you're just a regular old moviegoer, you'll probably love the hell out of it and not have that many problems. But if you're like me and have a bit more knowledge about film and its intricacies, some of the things that bothered me may bother you as well. Some of them major, some of them minor, but overall these did really impact my experience. But I would hate to negatively impact someone else's prior to viewing if they weren't going to be bothered, so if you haven't seen it yet, please do so before continuing. It's definitely a worth it watch in its theater run, regardless of which previously mentioned category you fall into. Alright, here comes the real stuff. While Guardians 2 didn't have the Marvel formula front and center just like the first, my problems with it mostly have to do with technical aspects of the film itself that involve sound design, some writing, and just things that arise from, you know, Star-Lord's dad being a fucking planet. But first things first, something we were all looking forward to: the music. Now, I absolutely fell in love with the soundtrack of the original film. The 70s and 80s music used really helps to create a laid-back atmosphere and near anti-hero attitude. They're responsible for creating so many memorable moments from Guardians, like the opening Star-Lord strut on the alien planet of Morag, when Peter introduces Gamera to Earth music, and when he gets tased while Hooked on a Feeling plays. There are so many great musical cues and sequences in this movie that it's near criminal. They're also just fucking great songs, so you know it's got that going as well. But in Guardians Volume 2, I noticed a severe deficit of catchy jingles. Sure, there was the opening fight against the tentacle creature, which featured a dance scene with Groot that went on for way too long. I think I remember Father and Son by Cat Stevens, I believe, at the end of the movie. And then there's that one moment when Ego tells Peter how much that one forgettable song he's playing means that he should go be a god like him or something. Goddamn, I didn't even mean to name name all the scenes I remembered, but does anyone else remember any others? I don't know, I just felt like there needed to be more of that instead of generic orchestra music. Blah. Maybe it just has to do with the film kind of going for a more somber subject matter, at least near the end, but it really didn't do a good job of conveying a less energetic tone than the first, which is what would be needed if that's what their goal was, but alas, the ball hath been dropped. And on that note, my next criticism is, holy shit, am I so tired of sad orchestra music will now play while this character tells you about their sad life story. There are about 3 or 4 of these, and I feel like every goddamn time it happened, I just cared less and less. When did silence during a scene, specifically a sad one, become a bad thing? I feel like that would have worked much better than the constant distraction the orchestra brings. Like, holy hell, man, I can interpret a scene's tone for myself, thanks. I don't need to be told by your fucking violin strings. Alright, I'm getting legitimately upset. Moving on. Actually, no, just kidding. The most egregious display of this was when Nebula literally tells Yondu's scavenger friend her life story of being turned into a cyborg by her surrogate father Thanos, and then they fucking acknowledge it? But oh no, that's okay then. Just because they acknowledge it with the scavenger's awkward response does not forgive how fucking insane that scene is. It was the most forced shit I've ever heard in my life. A lot of the scenes that are supposed to be emotional in this movie come off as so goddamn forced. Everyone in this film just espouses exposition over a melancholy orchestra, and I was not a fan. Speaking of forced, was I the only one who found at least like 25% of this movie's comedy out of place and immersion breaking? Most of the jokes were fine, some of them hysterical, but for some reason a startling amount of them continuously took me out of the experience and made me remember, oh yes, this is a product. This was talked about in roundtable sessions by men in business suits who needed a return on their millions of dollars, so they probably made the poor writers force bullshit in when scenes either didn't have a joke or weren't as funny as the business boys thought it should have been. That, or maybe the writers just felt like they weren't living up to the original enough, so they felt like they had to put in a bunch of jokes that didn't need to be there. I don't know. Some of it just felt like Deadpool lol random humor at its worst, you know what I mean? And what the hell was the deal with Rocket's winking thing?
But that isn't true at all. Dude. I'm using my wrong eye.
Was that funny? Is that comedy? I don't think that was supposed to be funny. It wasn't written as a joke. I don't know. I kind of feel like it was fucking awful. And I don't know why, I feel like Chris Pratt's reactions, specifically his reactions to Rocket's attempts at humor in Drax's antics when he goes, dude, come on, are weirdly played up, almost like they're trying to get a laugh out of them, except they're not inherently funny, and it's just weird, and it feels really overacted.
Dude, come on, I think you're overreacting a little bit.
You must be so embarrassed!
It's just bizarre. Now, see, it's funny, because I went in not remembering that Ego, the name of Peter's father, who introduces himself long before we know he is actually a fucking planet, is an established Marvel character known as Ego the Living Planet, which allowed me to view the following scenes through a lens I've never really experienced. The lens of a Marvel outsider. I had no goddamn clue he was gonna be a planet celestial thing, but apparently I was the only one. It's really weird, because I like the direction the movie takes you in. You're wondering, oh, the yellow people will be the bad guys, until the plot threads of Ego start to take shape and they defeat the entire yellow people fleet in like 5 minutes, during which I had a realization. There's no way the yellow people are going to be a big enough threat to carry this movie, but where does that leave Peter's dad? I quickly realized either something else was going to be introduced and rushed out the ass, or Peter's dad was going to turn out to be evil. So I kind of like the way that takes you, but it sucks that it also makes it very predictable. But I'd assume anyone who knew who Ego was would have known he'd turn, as the Ego character in the comics is, you know, an evil planet. So this is more of a gripe with the press, if anything. I like how the film leads you on only to defy your expectations, even if it's pretty damn predictable. None of the marketing I saw displayed this fact or even showed a glimmer of a possibility that this was the case. Apparently it was unveiled at some con or something, cause I don't think any of the trailers held any semblance of even Peter's dad's name. I don't think any of them said the name Ego or anything. It's weird. But yeah, like, who the fuck in production just thought it was a good idea to say, yeah, Kurt Russell's playing Ego the Living Planet, ain't that just the coolest shit? Also, why did Kurt Russell have to put cancer in Chris Pratt's mom's head? Sorry, it just sounds a lot funnier to me using the actors' names. But okay, why? He says he loved her? That he was like the only one he loved or something. So why? He didn't have to do that. I'm actually mad about this one. It's like not made clear at all why this happens. I asked 3 other people literally a day after they saw it, and just like me, they were coming up blank. My co-writer Jake, however, said that it was something along the lines of he loved her so much that he kept coming back, so he did it to guarantee he wouldn't go back. I obviously can't confirm this right now, and I feel like it may be correct, but Man, the fact that me and 3 other people I know weren't able to connect those dots really isn't a good sign. My last few gripes have to do with the climax specifically. The Guardians are all together taking on Ego right near his core, the goal being to send in explosives via a trigger-happy Groot and kill Ego. Now here's the thing, anyone who's had a basic knowledge of physics, hell, anyone who's taken school past 2nd grade could tell you that a planet's gravity comes from its core, right? So why the hell are they able to stand perpendicular to the core? If anything, they should be standing like above it on a platform, maybe seeing it down below. That would have been kind of cool, right? They like look down at it like, oh my god, there's the core. Ugh. But then they wouldn't have been able to have Gamora and Nebula involved in a pointless fall that separates them from the group. I guess it sort of plays into their relationship development, but barely. Wouldn't it make more sense and be much more visually stunning if instead of falling past the core, which makes no fucking sense, the characters rotated depending on what part of the core they were at, like some Super Mario Galaxy shit or something. That would be kind of neat. They could be jumping all around, constantly rotating around. It would have been fucking awesome. My realization of this came when Nebula and Gamora were falling, and I had the thought because Ego said the planet was just under the size of Earth's moon, so I was like, oh, I wonder if they're getting close to the other side of the planet because they're obviously way past the core, and then I immediately realized the complete fallacy in the concept of falling through a planet, and this plays into the biggest problem I think I had with Guardians 2, just how kind of schlocky it became near the end. When Ego and Star-Lord are fighting with their god powers like flying, and Kurt Russell just creates a bigger Kurt Russell out of rocks he puts together, I nearly lost my fucking mind. I feel like most of my complaints stem from this film overall not being as grounded in reality as the first, and that seems like a funny thing to say about a movie taking place in space and at one point inside of a fucking giant alien head, but what I mean is it feels like real places and real people. There's not a whole lot you need to get used to because we're not rushing around an incredible amount. In Guardians 2, a few times locations seem to have the sole purpose of progressing a plot point or making a funny, or at least we're not really given enough time to digest what's happening and what the individual purpose of locations are. What is that planet Yondu is on when he confronts Space Rocky and is met by the Sovereign Gold Lady? Why is everyone in the hotel kind of place using sex robots? Is that what it's for? Or are they optional? Would staying there just one night be normal, or would that be like staying at a love hotel when you're in Japan just for sightseeing? Why is the Sovereign's command center like an arcade with everyone acting like it's one? Why does it make video game noises? Oh, it's just for a joke. Now, that wasn't completely serious, obviously, but I think it conveys my point, which isn't even a huge problem to begin with, but I'd say it's a contributing factor to this film not feeling as real as the first, which did unfortunately limit my enjoyment of it by quite a bit. But my critique comes from a place of love. I really liked the first Guardians of the Galaxy. It was such a great and interesting movie that took you on a unique and slightly risque tour through a colorful and seemingly endless galaxy. Any sequel to that would have a very hard time following up, and because of my interest in these characters and adoration of its tone, I just felt like Guardians Volume 2 could have been better. But you know what, I feel like I really need to give credit where credit is due, because like I said, this is in no way a bad movie, and it's funny because I spent the last 10 minutes just shitting all over it, but I really did enjoy it, even though some things might have kind of hampered that experience a tad. The characters I liked the best were Rocket. He was great in this film. He kind of delved into himself a little bit more in a certain few scenes, specifically kind of in a conversation with Yondu. You know, there's very obvious themes of fatherhood, you know, with Peter Quill, Ego, and Yondu, and near the end, I really enjoyed this kind of respect that Chris Pratt gains for Yondu, because, you know, throughout most of the beginning of this film, even though he wasn't with Yondu a lot, and in the first film a lot, Chris Pratt, Peter Quill, has a bit of resentment towards Yondu for like kind of keeping him and for treating him as seemingly poorly as he did, but we learn in this movie that there are reasons for that. I like Yondu's send-off. When all of the other scavengers came, that's when it really hit me. That's when I was like, oh man, this is actually fucking cool. I want to get my dust scattered through space. Also, and I'm kind of stealing this one from my buddy Evan, but I completely agree with him on this, when Mantis touches Drax, who's usually the most energetic character, he's often used for comic relief, when she touches him and she just bursts out crying, that got me. That got me real good. Honestly, overall, it's a competent movie with a great cast and is still pretty dang alright. I'd give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 a hesitant, guarded thumbs up. More like thumbs up my bum with all these goddamn Marvel movies, am I right? Hey-o! Also, Sylvester Stallone is in this movie. That was fucking weird.
help but think things you never ever thought before. Shit would have never even been created if I wasn't born. I rap like a kid who hasn't lost his powers yet.
How did you get here?